June 3rd, 2025, will forever be etched in the memory of Kansas residents as one of the most chaotic and destructive days in recent years. A powerful storm system swept across the state with unusual force, unleashing torrential rains, large-scale flash flooding, and tornadoes that wreaked havoc across multiple towns. The aftermath was devastating. Entire communities were submerged, thousands were left without power, streets turned into rivers, and emergency response systems were pushed to the brink of collapse. The crisis began early in the morning in El Dorado, where heavy rainfall pounded the city without pause. Water quickly accumulated, turning roads into dangerous currents. The low-lying areas in the northwest part of the city were hit hardest, forcing dozens of families to evacuate as water levels rose alarmingly fast. Overwhelmed rescue teams deployed boats and high-clearance vehicles to reach those trapped in the middle of the emergency. At the same time, El Dorado's public school system canceled all activities planned for the following day, and local authorities urged residents to stay indoors and only travel for essential emergencies. Local churches and community centers were quickly converted into makeshift shelters for families who had lost their homes. Nearby Wichita experienced one of the day's most alarming episodes. In just a few hours, more than 7 inches of rain fell, an extraordinary amount that completely overwhelmed storm drains and flood channels. Entire streets were swallowed by muddy waters that carried debris, trash, and even vehicles. The scenes were apocalyptic: abandoned cars, intersections disappearing under the water, and residents waving for help from rooftops. One of the worst-hit areas in Wichita was east of Interstate 135, where rainfall reached rates of up to 3 inches per hour. Traffic cameras captured dramatic images: cars stalled mid-current, people being rescued with ropes and boats, and police blocking off major thoroughfares that had become impassable due to the flooding. As the situation worsened, flood emergency alerts were issued for over 200,000 residents. Emergency services were quickly overwhelmed. Sedgwick County received over 1,900 flood-related emergency calls in just a few hours, proof of the disaster's scale. Over 100 confirmed water rescues took place during this period, many in extremely dangerous conditions. One of the most harrowing rescues occurred when a woman became trapped in her vehicle, surrounded by rising floodwaters. Firefighters reached her using a boat and ropes, pulling her to safety just before her car was swept away. Rescue operations continued into the evening, with helicopters flying over the hardest-hit zones to assess damage and coordinate further missions. Meanwhile, Sedgwick County activated its emergency response plan and requested immediate state support. Governor Laura Kelly declared a state of emergency to fast-track the delivery of aid to affected communities. This declaration allowed for the rapid deployment of personnel, rescue equipment, power generators, and essential supplies such as food, blankets, and dry clothing. The devastation extended far beyond El Dorado and Wichita. In the Kansas City metropolitan area, conditions were equally critical. A powerful tornado touched down near the Truman Sports Complex, leaving a path of destruction in its wake. Trees were uprooted, power lines were knocked down, and rooftops were torn off homes. Streets were littered with debris, and windows exploded under the pressure of violent winds. Shortly after the tornado passed, the area was struck by intense rainfall that triggered new flash floods. The combination of extreme winds and rapidly rising water created a dual catastrophe. Emergency teams were forced to split their efforts between wind-related incidents and urgent flood rescues. In Raytown, a suburb southeast of Kansas City, streets were overtaken by floodwaters. Local authorities warned residents of the high risk of electrocution due to downed power lines. Within minutes, over 10,000 homes lost electricity, and utility crews worked through the night to restore power. The city's drainage system simply couldn't keep up. Sewer systems collapsed, sending raw sewage back into residential homes. Many people had to climb onto their roofs and balconies to signal for help. In some neighborhoods, the water rose as high as the windows, trapping residents who had no way to escape on their own. First responders were stretched to the limit. Videos posted on social media showed people using makeshift rafts, constructed from doors, wooden pallets, and even trash bins, to try and save their neighbors. Community solidarity became a lifeline in the face of overwhelmed official systems. In several neighborhoods, garbage began floating freely through the flooded streets. Trash bags, tires, and debris drifted along the currents. Some residents even reported seeing entire cars floating by. One man from El Dorado said his vehicle had disappeared during the night and hadn't been found the next morning. The Wichita Police Department ramped up patrols and issued stern warnings against driving through flooded areas. Even shallow water can be deadly, officials stressed. The message was clear: staying indoors was the safest option to avoid worsening the crisis. Amid this catastrophe, dozens of churches, schools, and community centers turned into temporary shelters. Volunteers distributed food and essential items to affected families, while social workers provided emotional support to those who had lost everything. The National Weather Service continued to monitor the evolution of the storm system closely, warning that rains could persist into the following day, raising the threat of additional flooding. Forecasts were grim. More water meant more destruction. As the waters slowly began to recede, the full extent of the damage became evident: collapsed roads, weakened bridges, destroyed homes, and totaled vehicles. Drone footage revealed a devastated Kansas, with each affected area bearing its own tragic story. In the end, what happened on June 3, 2025, was not just another storm. It was an extreme weather event that tested the limits of emergency response systems, urban infrastructure, and community resilience. The swift action of first responders, the determination of local authorities, and the solidarity of neighbors prevented the disaster from claiming even more lives. But the scars it left behind will not soon be forgotten. On June 3, 2025, Tampa residents woke up to a scene that looked straight out of a disaster movie. A violent hailstorm struck the city without any visible warning, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The event began around 10:10 a.m. local time and brought with it hailstones up to 1.5 inches in diameter, accompanied by wind gusts that exceeded 60 miles per hour, 100 kilometers per hour. The damage was immediate and widespread. Homes, vehicles, public buildings, and infrastructure were all hit hard. Although the National Weather Service, NWS, had issued a severe thunderstorm warning earlier that morning, few anticipated the storm's true intensity. The alert mentioned wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour and the possibility of hail, but the storm's actual magnitude surprised even meteorologists. Within minutes, entire neighborhoods were battered by large hailstones that punched through rooftops, shattered windows, and ripped apart exterior siding. One of the hardest-hit areas was East Lake Orient Park, near the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. Residents there reported hail the size of golf balls pounding their homes and cars. Some described it as a deafening, non-stop barrage against windows and rooftops. According to reports, more than 5,625 properties suffered hail damage in the Tampa area alone. The aftermath was devastating. Cars parked on the street were left with shattered windshields and bodies covered in deep dents. In some cases, hailstones pierced through vehicle exteriors. One local resident, Antoine McMillan Sr., recounted how a tree came crashing down on his car during the storm as he watched helplessly from inside his home. Wind gusts reached up to 64 miles per hour, particularly near the intersection of Interstate 4 and US 301. Videos shared by locals like J.K. McKill, Michelle Marie, and Kim James captured chilling footage of hailstones slamming into rooftops, gas stations, and cars at astonishing speeds. Tampa's emergency response teams, led by Police Chief Holloway, Mayor Welch, and Emergency Services Director Amber Balding, were quickly deployed to begin rescue and cleanup operations. As soon as the storm's core had passed, city crews and neighbors joined forces to clear debris and assess the damage. As inspections progressed, the scale of the destruction became clear. Thousands of homes and businesses would need major repairs. To make matters worse, widespread power outages were reported throughout the Tampa Bay area, complicating rescue and recovery efforts. Beyond the physical destruction, the storm also left a deep emotional toll on the community. Outside the urban centers, agricultural zones near Tampa also sustained significant losses. Essential crops were severely damaged, raising concerns about potential disruptions to local food supply chains. Farmers in areas like Brandon, Clearwater, and Plant City reported that large portions of their crops were destroyed. This event has reignited growing concerns about the increasing frequency and intensity of extreme weather events linked to climate change. Climate scientists have warned that rising global temperatures create ideal conditions for more severe storms, including the kind of strong updrafts that lead to larger and more destructive hailstones. Later that same afternoon, the storm continued its northeast path, hitting other major cities such as Orlando and parts of northern Miami. In Orlando, both downtown and suburban areas suffered significant damage. Winds ripped off rooftops and shattered windows, while cars and parking lots were totaled by the hail. In Miami, neighborhoods such as Coconut Grove and Miami Beach also experienced substantial damage. Commercial buildings were heavily impacted, and older residential areas in downtown Miami saw roof collapses and prolonged power outages that lasted for hours. The situation was especially alarming in coastal zones, which are inherently more vulnerable due to their proximity to the sea. The U.S. reported that the storm was triggered by an extreme low-pressure system that formed in the Gulf of Mexico. The combination of high humidity, scorching temperatures, and strong winds created perfect conditions for massive hail formation. In some parts of the state, hailstones the size of tennis balls were recorded. The impact on public infrastructure was severe. Power lines were knocked down in several cities, causing widespread outages in Tampa, Orlando, and Miami. Segments of major highways, including I-4 and I-95, were temporarily closed due to fallen trees and scattered debris. Many homes also suffered irreparable roof damage, with major leaks and partial collapses reported. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis issued a state of emergency, pledging to coordinate with local governments to deliver immediate aid. "We are fully committed to helping Floridians affected by this storm," he stated. Relief efforts included the distribution of generators, food, water, and temporary shelters for those who lost everything. After the main storm had passed, the NWS warned of the potential for aftershocks in the form of thunderstorms and heavy rain over the following hours. There were also alerts about the possibility of isolated tornadoes forming along the coast, where atmospheric conditions remained unstable. Residents were urged to stay alert and monitor weather updates closely.